You are about to leave for the airport. The map says the drive takes 55 minutes. Your flight closes in 57. So you have exactly enough time. Look at that phrase for a second. Exactly enough. It means every light has to be green. It means nothing can go wrong because there is no room for anything to go wrong. There is a name for the room you did not leave. It is called a margin of safety. It is the single idea Benjamin Graham built his whole book on. By the end of this, you will know where a margin comes from and the 3 questions that find one, and you will never confuse a good thing with a good price again. Here is the picture Graham used. An engineer builds a bridge. He builds it to hold 30,000 pounds. Then he puts up a sign that says 10,000. The bridge is not weak. The sign is not a lie. The gap is on purpose. That gap is the margin of safety. It is the room between what a thing can survive and what you actually ask it to carry. Notice what the gap is for. It is not there for the trucks he can see. It is there for the ones he cannot. The rusted axle, the load nobody weighed. The engineer is not predicting the future. He is making the future matter less. And here is the quiet part. When a storm finally came, nobody stood on that bridge holding their breath. The margin did its job by making the worst day boring.
That is what room is for. Not for the days you can see coming, for the ones you cannot. So how do you build that gap with money? You need 2 numbers, and most people only ever look at one. The first number is the price. That is easy. The price is the sticker. It is on the screen, and it changes every day. The second number is the value. That just means what the thing actually earns and owns. Watch this with a real shop. A little sandwich shop earns $10,000 a year after everything is paid. Somebody offers you the shop for $100,000. So you hand over $100,000, and it takes 10 years of earnings just to get back to even. Now somebody else offers you the same shop for $50,000. Same shop, same sandwiches, same $10,000 a year. Now it takes 5 years. Here is the part that matters. In the second deal, the shop can have a bad year, lose a customer, need a new oven, and you are still fine. In the first deal, everything has to go right. The gap between the price and the value is doing the work. And the gap only exists if you paid less than the thing is worth. Play the bad year out. The rent goes up. The road outside gets dug up for a month. A new sandwich place opens across the street. The buyer who paid $100,000 is now doing math at midnight. The buyer who paid $50,000 is annoyed. That is all. Annoyed.
Same bad luck. Completely different night's sleep. Now the strange part. A margin of safety is not about being right. It is about being allowed to be wrong. Graham was not trying to find people who could predict the future. He assumed you would guess wrong sometimes, because everybody does. So the gap is not a reward for being smart. It is the cost of admitting you are human. Flip it around and look at the other person. Paying full price is a bet that everything goes perfectly. Perfection has never once shown up on time, which leads somewhere uncomfortable. A wonderful business at a perfect price has no margin at all. And an ordinary business at a cheap price can have a huge one. The quality is not the margin. The gap is. And the gap gets tested more often than people think. From October 2007 to March 2009, the S&P 500 fell about 57%. Not a strange company, the 500 biggest American ones. Anybody who had paid exactly enough was underwater. Anybody who had left room was still standing.
Warren Buffett wrote the preface to Graham's book, and he pointed at 2 chapters as the ones that matter. One of them is this one. 60 years of experience, and the lesson was still leave room to be wrong. And leaving room does one more thing people miss. In 2009, prices were on the floor.
The person with no room had to sell down there just to breathe. The person with room got to buy down there. Same crash. One person's disaster was the other person's discount. Bring it back to your own week. You already use margins everywhere without calling them that. You leave early. You charge the phone to 100 when you only need 40. You keep one clean shirt you are not planning to wear. Nobody calls that pessimism. It is just room. Money is the one place people quietly stop doing it. A budget with no slack. A payment that only works if the overtime keeps coming. And bad luck rarely queues up politely. The car dies the same week the overtime stops. Margins are how you survive the week when everything arrives at once. So, 3 questions, and they are Graham's, not mine. 1. What is it worth if the exciting part never happens? Value the thing on what it earns now, not on the story about later. That gives you a number. 2. What am I being asked to pay? That is the sticker today. 3. How big is the gap between those 2 numbers? That gap, set as a percentage, is the margin of safety. And Graham put a number on it. He wanted to pay about 2/3 of what he thought a thing was worth. 1/3 of room. On purpose. Run his rule on the sandwich shop. Start to finish. You did the boring homework and the shop is worth $90,000. $10,000 a year in real earnings, a fair oven, a solid lease, 90. Graham's rule says do not pay 90. Wait for 60. If the price never comes down, you do nothing. Doing nothing is a full and complete answer. Most people cannot stand that part. They feel the train leaving. But look at what waiting bought you. $30,000 of being wrong. The oven can die. A bad summer can come. Your homework can be off by 1/3. And you still have not lost money. That is what the discount is. It is not greed. It is armor you bought with patience. So the answer to the whole chapter is not a stock, and it is not a secret. It is a habit. You do not ask, is this good? You ask, is this cheap enough that I can be wrong and survive it? Be honest about what the margin is not. It is not a promise. You can leave room and still lose. It just turns a knockout into a bruise. And you can recover from a bruise. Same question the engineer asked before he wrote 10,000 on a bridge that holds 30. That is the margin of safety. The room between what a thing can survive and what you asked it to carry. But there is a leak in this story. The gap is measured in money, and money does not sit still. Something is shrinking it, quietly, every single year, whether you buy anything or not.